Joey quickly stowed his gear now that he knew where he was going to be staying. He found it was going to be a tight fit, trying to squeeze his environmental suit into one locker and then the rest of his belongings into the other locker. He didn't know if he was going to have enough room for everything, but eventually he figured out a way. Remembering his old time in the military, he knew all the ways of saving space, and he used every single trick in the book. It worked, and eventually he ended up heading to the bridge with his gear so he could talk to the captain herself and find out exactly what needs fixing on this tub. When he got there, he saw that most of the crew was chit-chatting, but as soon as he entered the door, well, everyone suddenly got quiet. He looked around a little bit left and right, and they were all staring at him, but seemingly trying to turn their heads every single time he looked in their direction. Oh boy, he thought, what'd I do? Did I fart in my suit or something? He thought he had somehow pissed them off. Then again, he did realize he was human, and humans had a reputation. A few bad reputations, that is. Eventually, he was able to find the captain as he looked over on her scales, and she had the marker on her. He walked up, introduced himself officially, stuck his hand out to shake her hand. She was a little confused by this, but then shook his hand again. As he looked straight into her eyes, he simply asked, "So what do you need me to fix?" With that, she was surprised. He was very cold in the way he spoke, very deliberate, very professional. Though he didn't speak in what she understood as proper tones, he did in fact not insult her and simply asked for his duties. As a good captain, she simply adjusted herself slightly as she looked him up and down at his muscular form, and then started to pull out a display. The display showed the layout of the ship and each different section. Joey looked at each one and started to understand exactly how the ship was designed, and he started to look a little concerned. His concern was warranted since this was a patchwork ship. Patchwork ships were not uncommon, but they usually didn't stay out in the void for very long. A patchwork ship is just what it sounds like, where several ships are merged together, where they use high heat to make sure that the frame itself and the keel does not come apart. Aside from that, there are several different sections. The engine compartment came from one ship, most of the living arrangements came from another, and the bridge was still another piece. Along with that, the lower decks, that is, if you look at the ventral side itself as the lower decks, came from yet another ship, and this was mostly the cargo hold. He realized what was going on and studied the diorama as he started listening to what she needed. As it turns out, they were having trouble with all the different connections going from one section of the ship to the other. Along with that, the engine was not working at optimal capacity. Optimal capacity could be anywhere from 95 to 98%. If he could fix this, he could definitely get himself a raise. He realized this might not be too difficult, but there was a lot of things to take care of. And he looked at some of the areas he'd be working in, and he started looking very closely and realized how difficult it was going to be. Yet, he didn't show it, he didn't say it. He simply listened to the captain go over each of these sections one by one. As she did, he started to pull out a strange piece of thin wood bound up by a piece of metal. He then took a writing implement and began to write down his notes on each of these sections, writing as furiously as he could to make sure he didn't miss anything. The whole briefing took approximately an hour and 20 minutes, and yet Joey didn't do anything except ask for clarification on a few areas. Everyone inside the bridge was amazed by this, as he was solely focused on his work. This was strange. Wasn't he human? I mean, they have reputations. This was odd. But as he did this, many of the other crew members would walk behind him, looking him up and down. Some of them, who focused mainly on smell, got close enough to audibly sniff behind his back. They believed Joey didn't hear this, as they believed his sense of hearing was limited. What they didn't know is Joey was trying desperately not to shudder at the idea of someone coming behind him and sniffing his back, or sniffing behind his ear, or in one case, sniffing up his leg. He worried about this very much. Only once did he see a motion of the captain to wave them off, but was actually surprised when he saw that her tail was raising up and then suddenly slammed onto the bulkhead itself. Yet she didn't even break stride in what she was talking about. This seemed to calm the crew down a little bit. Once the briefing was over, Joey simply went over his notes and stared at the diagram for a good 4 minutes. The captain kept asking if he had any questions, but instead he just looked and said nope, and going back and forth to his notes. Eventually, he just turned it off and said, "All right, I'll get started." He went to turn around, and the captain said, "Where are you starting at first?" "The engine. Where else?" And he simply started walking. On the way there, he had to swing by the crew compartment and grab some additional tools, and then he got to work. The engine compartment was very warm. The cooling system wasn't working as good as he had hoped, yet it was doable. Although he found himself, within the course of the next 4 hours, completely soaked in sweat, to the point where he had to take off much of his outer coverings. When this happened, he could actually hear talking outside the door. He wondered what the hell was going on, but he was far too busy to actually care what was going on. He continued to maneuver his body around different conduits and pipes, making sure he was able to get in position to fix what was wrong. The engines themselves were maxing out at 71%, and before he had even got there, it was able to only hold about 69% of its own efficiency. This was worrisome because if it goes below 50%, you can kiss FTL jumps goodbye. Joey continued to work on it tirelessly until he finally was connecting the last piece, checking constantly on his readouts to see if everything was right, and eventually he finished up and went, "Oh, fuck yeah." And as he finally got out of his position, went over to the main console, flipped a few more levers, and suddenly the ship lurched in one direction, flying everybody off to the side as the engines jumped from 69% to 98% efficiency in a matter of a moment. With this, many of the crew were known to crash into the walls, and unfortunately for Joey, as he ended up throwing himself against the engine compartment itself, the door flung open, and several of the crew ended up tumbling down and landing right on top of him. Many of them apologizing, yet as they were having difficulty getting up, they would maneuver their bodies in ways to rub against Joey. He was trying his best not to take this personally, as he kept saying, "Could you please get off of me? Could you please move your... Seriously, get off of my face." With that, a few of them realized that Joey might be not interested in their species. Although, as they began to go away, a few of them laughed and said something about biological response. Joey, completely embarrassed, realizing that he had popped wood having a bunch of females rubbing all over him. Not only that, but he was all sweaty, which made everything very slick. This didn't help matters. He was worried. He was worried that the lack of professionalism would cause problems. He already knew the lesson, don't shit where you eat, or dipping your pen in company ink, or even in any way, shape, or form risking your own livelihood over what? A piece of strange? Why do you think he was out there in the middle of the void working on a ship that was falling apart around him? He didn't let the thought linger too much as he went back to work and went from the stern of the ship all the way forward, methodically taking everything to heart. Every small little fracture or infraction that mattered to the ship was taken care of by him, even if he had to open up all his gear just to do a job that lasted 10 seconds. And then he would put it away, note it in his little book, and then keep going. He was working for over 140 hours before he finally stopped. Eventually, walking into the chow hall, the galley was set up for only half the crew to eat at a time. As Joey walked in, he immediately plopped his tools next to a table, went over to the chow hall line, and realized that it's the middle of the night, their time. So, of course, no one was going to be awake except for two. Two of the species were nocturnal, which meant they would be around. Chances are they would be in the bridge and not in the chow hall. As he went over and started to take whatever food he could, he realized that he had filled 2 trays full of chow and then sat down and started scarfing it down. He believed he could enjoy this little modicum of peace before he took his 5 hours of sleep. He needed sleep at this point. But there was so much that needed to be done on this ship, he didn't want to take too much time. He worried there would be a blowout or a brownout if he didn't get his job done. He worried about this very much. But the problems, they seemed to compile. As he had gone on to the second tray of food that he was eating, he saw several different crew members walking in. Many of them seemed to be more colorful. Those that were more of an avian species always would spread out their feathers, seemingly showing off the colors inside them. This, along with the way they were prancing, sort of, flipping their tails if they had one. Didn't matter if they were avian, mammalian, or reptilian. They were always flipping their tails in a way of trying to get a hold of Joey's eyes and put them close to the base of said tail. What Joey didn't know at that point is that the crew had decided to look up human desires. And unfortunately for half the crew, they found something that disturbed them. As soon as they came across something about the 34th area, many of them immediately stopped and said they would need a few days to wrap their heads around it. Though Joey didn't know this, he didn't really care. The only thing he cared about was food and sleep. Those are the only 2 biological functions he cared about at that point. As the females that came in started to sit down, they realized that Joey had almost finished his second tray of food, and when he did, he simply excused himself, called them ladies, and then left. This was something that made them more than a little upset. They wanted to know why this male was not paying attention to all their preening, all their displays, all their dances. What the hell was going on? A few of them started complaining, saying it was someone else's fault that he was not paying attention. Oh, your feathers are in the way. Oh, you put too much musk on. Oh, you are too much makeup. Oh, you too this, too that. Oh, you're too disgusting. You can't be seen by yada, 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 yada. Joey, needing to take a break and a breather to let everything settle, was just outside the door and was trying to not laugh hysterically at the whole situation. Eventually, he ended up back in his quarters, and as he was about to enter the room, one of the more humanoid species walked up directly and just stared into his eyes. Joey, dead on his feet, simply stated, "Can I help you with something?" She simply stared. He saw those ice blue eyes staring back at him. It was though the color in her eyes was shifting back and forth. It was odd. He didn't have time. He simply asked, "Do you need something? Because I need to get some rest." With that, the female seemed a little discouraged, and then Joey simply went into his room, not even bothering to hose off, but simply falling onto his cot and not really caring about anything else at that point. 5 hours later, he woke up to screaming outside of his door. He wondered what in the flying hell was going on. Eventually, he got up, was able to take a quick 2-minute shower, which is all the water pumps could handle at that point, and simply change into a fresh uniform and work his way towards the bridge. As he got there, he could hear the entire crew screaming. The captain, barely able to keep everybody relaxed, was screeching as much as she could as she flipped her tail more and more, sometimes crashing into a crewmate, especially if one tried to get a little too close to her face. Joey simply said, "What the hell is going on? Can't a man get some sleep around here?" All of a sudden, all the females stopped and stared at him, many of them with vitriol in their eyes. One of them evenly said, "Why don't you pay attention?" "What?" Still trying to knock the sleep out of his head, Joey was confused. "Well, pay attention. I've been fixing the damn ship. Of course, I'm paying attention to every detail. What are you talking about?" The girls all seemed to look at each other and seemed almost to look at him with pity in their eyes, as though he didn't understand what they were talking about. The kicker is, he was brought here as an engineer and just spent a week's worth of time working without stopping. Of course, he's tired and his brain isn't working right. Of course, he doesn't give a shit. But they didn't know that because he's human, and humans have a reputation. Eventually, he figured it out as the girls were continually screaming over each other, trying to figure out what in the hell was going on, and how their displays of affection were being simply ignored. Joey was like, hold on. Oh, seriously, that's what this is about? You're all fighting over me. I'm human. I'm not even your species. Why would you care? I mean, there must be other guys that you're interested in. Without skipping a beat, the captain simply stated, "You're the first male any of us have seen in almost 2 of your years." Oh, I get it, Joey said. "Oh, you're all pent up. You're that pent up. Oh, shit. Okay. Problems. Big problems. I knew there was going to be a problem coming on this ship. Oh, crap. I didn't know it would be this bad. Tell you what, I have a solution." All of a sudden, they were all paying attention, believing that he would simply have a rotation of females, one each day or something like that. But his idea was a little different. "Here's what I'll do. To keep order, everything's got to go through the captain," as he pointed towards her. Her reptilian features seemed to sharpen a bit as she didn't know where he was going. "Tell you what, I'll do this. The captain will decide whoever can hit on me." "Why would we strike you?" one of them said. No, how do I put this? "If you are interested in me, she will decide which one of you it's your turn to show affection in your own species way." And I hate these translators because humans use something called slang. Slang is certain terms that mean something is other than what you're directly saying. So if I say something you don't understand, please ask me to clarify. I know humans have a reputation. We have several reputations, and I understand the one of them you are all pursuing. However, as he walked forward towards the captain, to make sure that we don't lose control of everything on this freaking tub, the captain will not only decide, but she will be the first one. And before any of you can even think about pursuing, she will be the first one. Okay? Okay, good. Now I got work to do." And he simply turned and walked out. Everyone was simply flabbergasted at this as they all turned towards the captain. The captain's jaw was wide open and her tail was flat on the ground, showing that she was completely stunned. She couldn't even raise her own hand-like talons from the console as she was basically proposed to in her own language. But she was like, "What? The proposal to have intercourse, but that doesn't make sense." She thought to herself, as many of them came up and started to wonder and started to ask her why that was happening. And didn't he know the truth about hers? I mean, it doesn't make sense. And then the captain realized what he did. He must have known about her species. Her species has a mating cycle. She has absolutely no interest in intercourse until her mating cycle. Without skipping a beat, she reached over and looked at the calendar. My mating cycle doesn't even begin for another 4 months. His contract is for 5. And the more she thought about it, the more she realized that by the time he had finished up 4 months worth of work at the pace he's doing, he will have nothing but time by then. And there's a good chance by then they would end up with another ship and or another crewmate. This was clever. And then the crew saw something they didn't think they would see. The captain began to laugh at the absurdity of it, as they all continued to claim that she needs to go and to hell with her mating cycle. She needs to go and present herself to the human. And as she started to calm down, she simply stated, I don't think that's going to work. With my species and the fact that he seems busy. Everyone started to ask, why did he seem busy? Then they could hear clanging on the bulkhead as Joey was taking another panel off and dropping it onto the floor. Yep, he's busy fixing the ship. So, I'll have to keep you all posted. The crew returned to work, but the crew were definitely not happy about this.